Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Rousseau's Social Contract, where we look at Rousseau's text Social Contract. Well, today, we're finishing up book four with the last two chapters, 8 and 9. Uh, Most of it will be 8 because the 8 is the much very long chapter. It's going to be a long chapter in that sense on civil religion. And then uh, chapter 9 is actually a very brief conclusion. So let's go look at, and because remember that most of Book Four's discussion here has been his attempt to show the best, how can one best run moderate and to ensure the stability of a republican form of regime. And he uses the example of Rome, and we've got with the Comitia and the question of the Comitia, which was the people's assemblies, the assembly of the people, right? Assembly of the Romans, and then the discussion of the tribunate, and then the discussion of the dictator, and then a discussion now of civil religion, right? The which is deals with the because remember just actually I forgot one, the dictatorship, and then the censor, right? Tribunate and the censor. The censor is again the instrument that deals with the question of mores, mores, social habits, and customs of the Roman people. So therefore, civil religion is the embodiment of those customs, the normalization of those, right? So let's go look at chapter 8, civil religion. Which again, the origins of this chapter was part of most of the criticism has been for the most part of this chapter book is that only this, not the whole thing, but a smaller version of it was put in the Geneva manuscript. And some people argued all these other things were kind of like Rousseau's adding them on, and really, really essential to his argument. But Master disagrees with that, and I think this is right. So therefore we're returning to the question of the civil religion in this sense, and focus on. So let's turn to the text, okay? Men at first had no other kings than God, nor any other government than theocracy. Okay, that's the footnote 130. Let's get my, yeah. And of course, this is like, for the first verse of this chapter, see the final section of the Geneva manuscript. Paragraph 7 of the draft became paragraph 4 and 6, and the remainder of the draft starting at paragraph 15 of the final version. Although the concept of civil religion was understandably been viewed with great suspicion by those who lived through the excesses of Hitler and Stalin, or so frame of reference would have borne to mind. Compare Montesquieu's consideration of the greatness of Romans. Chapter 10. Aside from that religion is always the best guarantee one can have of the morals of men. It was a special trait of the Romans that they mingled some religious sentiment with their love of their country. Similarly for Machiavelli, the religion introduced by Numa was among the primary causes of Rome's success, and the observance of divine worship is the cause of greatness and republic. So its neglect is the cause of their ruin. Discourses on Livy, Book 1, Chapter 11. So, again, this is the importance of religion in here, of that the first gods of that, the first men had no kings other than God. Again, that's the Israeli, the kingdom of Israel, the Israels in that sense. No king other than God. They reasoned like Caligula, and then they reasoned correctly. So first they reasoned like Caligula, but then they reasoned correctly, and I said a long period of change in sentiment and ideas was necessary before men could bring themselves to accept a fellow man as their master and flatter themselves that this was a good arrangement. In other words, they had to, decide it had to be God, had to be something better, had to be something extreme. And it took a long time to get them to accept their fellow man as their fellow master. And they had to flatter themselves that this was a good arrangement in that sense, right? By the sole fact that God was placed at the head of every political society, it followed that there were as many gods as there were people. Two peoples foreign to each other and nearly always enemies could not recognize the same master for long. Two armies battling one another could not obey the same leader. Thus, national divisions resulted in polytheism, and beyond that, in theology. Beyond that, in theological as well as civil intolerance. So, therefore, in other words, the divisions and that, and then that led to theological as well as civil, which are naturally the same thing. In other words, the theological intolerance and civil intolerance are identical in the sense. In other words, as belief structures that since the gods and the things are tied to this, and therefore a good citizen loves his own and hates his enemy, right? In that sense, um, in other words, so therefore, repeat that in theological as well as in civil, which are naturally the same thing, as will be stated. Uh, and let's continue. The whimsical notion of the Greeks who identified the gods of barbarian peoples with their own gods came from their other notion that there were the natural sovereigns of the people, that they were the natural sovereigns of the peoples. Therefore, they became the idea that the Greeks ruled the barbarians. Right. This is the Therefore, the Greeks identified the barbarian gods with their own gods as a means of making those people subservient to them, right? But in our day, the equation of the gods of various nations is ridiculous rhetorician, as if Moloch, Saturn, or Cronus could have been the same as God, as if the Phoenicians Baal and Greek Zeus and the Romans Jupiter could have been the same, as if imaginary beings bearing different names could have something in common. So, in other words, that how can it be they're imagined, that they're the creations of this. Therefore, how can they have different names, have something in common, right? So he's kind of putting the question up there that that no, it's ridiculous in our minds, right? In a sense, the question may be asked: why under paganism, when each state had its cult and its gods, were there no war of religions? I reply that it was for this very reason that each state, having its own cult as well as its own government, did not distinguish between its gods and its political laws. Political war was also theological. In other words, the reason. The argument was, oh, the Greeks didn't have it. No, they did. The problem was political war. In other words, they didn't have. In other words, the argument was that only with the rise of Christianity and religion we had theological wars. Now, no, sorry, no. Rousseau wants to put that to rest, arguing that all war is theological in the sense that there's no difference, because since the nature of each community, each people, each state, each state has its cult and its gods, right? And therefore, political war was a conflict between those peoples and their gods, right? Um, so therefore, political war was also theological. The departments of the gods were, so to speak, fixed by the boundaries of the nation. So gods of one people had no rights over the other peoples. The gods of the pagans were not jealous gods. They divided domination over the words among themselves. Moses himself and the Hebrew people accepted this idea sometimes when speaking of the God of Israel. It is true that they regarded as nothing the gods of the Canaanites, as a prescribed people destined for destruction, whose lands they were to occupy. But notice how they spoke of the divinities of neighboring peoples whom they were forbidden to attack. It is not the possession of what belongs to Kamos, your God, said Jephthah to the Ammonites, legitimate yours. By the same token, we possess the land of our victorious God has acquired. Um, this is the Latin "Nana quea pedestia camos Deus tedo triba jura dubenter." So reads the text of the Vulgate. Father De Castro translated it: Do you not believe that you have the right to possess what belongs to Chamos, your God? I am ignorant of the implication of the Hebrew text, but I see that in the Vulgate, Gypsia positively acknowledges the right of the god of Chamos. And the French translator weakens this recognition by an according to you, which is not in the Latin. Okay, 131. This is from the book of Judges, chapter 11, verse 28. Comparison translation from Jerusalem Bible. Do you not possess all that Chemos, your God, took from its owners? In the same fashion, whatever Yahweh, our God, took from our owners, that we too possess. So therefore, Rousseau gets it right in the Vulgate in that sense. We compare it like that. It seems to me that this was a clear acknowledgement of the parity between the rights of Chamos and those of the God of Israel. But when the Jews, subject to the king of Babylon and later to the kings of Syria, wanted to remain obstinate in not acknowledging any god than theirs, this refusal, regarded as rebellion against the victor, brought on them the persecution of which we read in their history, and of which there are no other examples prior to Christianity. Right? It is perfectly evident that the wars of the Phoenician, called the Holy Wars, was not a war of religion. Its object was to punish sacrilege, not to subjugate the non-believers. Right? This is 132. As Grimsby note on his edition, Phocia was one of the large towns of Asia Minor. In 356 BC, a religious war broke out between the Phoenicians and the Thebans, because the Theban leaders, who had been accused of cultivating sacred lands, refused to pay the heavy fine demanded of them by Amphictyons. Sparta and Athens went to help the Phoenicians, and Philip of Macedon the Thebans, who were ultimately victorious. Compare Thucydides' account of the role of the curse of the goddess, and the curse of Tiresias in the origins of the Peloponnesian War, Book 1, particularly paragraphs 118 to 135, right? The first volume of that. So again, the old gods, how the old religious had like this, that this was the question of religious when the Phoenician War is not that, it's political in that context. And then he gives Master, and then gives the more specific context of this and the Phoenician War in terms of that. And then he even started to look at the origins of the Peloponnesian War, was kind of religious in that sense. It was political, not in terms of fixing non-believers. Okay, that only with this point of this becomes the problem, right? The Jewish after Babylon and their refusal to submit to this. And then, therefore, with Christianity, the sense that we're not going to submit to this, no other God. Therefore, since each religion was uniquely attached to the laws of the state that prescribed it, there was no other way to convert a people except to subjugate it, nor any missionaries other than conquerors. And as the obligation to change cult was the law of the vanquished, it was necessary to start by winning before talking about it. Far from fighting, far from men fighting for the gods, it was, as in Homer, the gods who fought for the men. Each man asked his own god for victory and paid for it with new altars. Before capturing a place, the Romans called upon its gods to abandon it, and when they let the people of Tartanum keep their And when they let the people of Tartary keep their angry gods, it was because at the point the Romans considered those gods as subjects to their own and forced to pay them homage. They let the vanquished keep their gods as they let them keep their laws. A crown for Jupiter, a crown for the Capitoline Jupiter was often the only tribute they imposed. Finally, the Romans, having spread their cult and their gods along their empire, and having themselves adopted the gods of the vanquished by granting legal status in the city to them all, the peoples of that vast empire graduated to have a multitude of gods and of cults, which were approximately the same everywhere. And that is how paganism in the known world finally became a single identical religion. Therefore, it was under Rome. In other words, because they let all the gods combine and they united with the Roman cult in that sense, right? It was under these circumstances that Jesus came to establish a spiritual kingdom on earth. By separating the theological system from the political system, this brought about the end of the unity of the state and caused the internal division that has never ceased to stir up Christian peoples. So therefore, it was his Rousseau's point was that, okay, in the context of what the Romans did, the Romans accepted all the other gods in their system under their subjugation and created a universal system, right, of these multi gods. This is how paganism became a single identical religion in that sense by the Roman Empire, the Roman cult, and how it intermediated and brought in and subjugated the gods. It was in this circumstances that Jesus, right, Jesus established his kingdom on earth, his spiritual kingdom on earth, and separated the theological from the political, right, system. And this divide constantly stirred up this. Now, since this new idea of an otherworldly kingdom could never be understood by the pagans, they always regarded Christians as true rebels who breathed a hypocritical submissiveness when only waiting the moment to become independent and masters and usurp adroitly the authority they were pretending out of respect of weakness. This was the cause of the persecutions, right? This is the idea of the persecutions in that sense. In other words, they suspected the hypocrisy. They think, oh, this is they're being this way. They're being submissive only because of their of the weakness, and they're just waiting for the moment that they will seep an authority and take over, right? In the manuscript, Rousseau notes for the last chapter of the social contract, they have broken every one of Caesar's edicts by claiming that there was another emperor, Jesus. Acts, Book of Acts, 17, verse 7, right? The biblical translation is from the Jerusalem Bible. Rousseau's French Bible reads Roy, king, not emperor. Okay. What the pagans feared happened. Then everything took on a different appearance. The humble Christians changed their language, and soon this supposedly otherworldly kingdom was seen to become under a visible leader, the most violent despotism of the world. However, since there has always been a prince and civil law, this double power had resulted in a perpetual conflict of jurisdiction that had made any good polity impossible in Christian states. And no people has ever been able to figure out whom it was obliged to obey, the master or the priest. So therefore, this is the problem. This dual, there was dual loyalty. In other words, Christianity brought us separate kingdoms, and therefore, who was the ultimate, the spiritual or the secular? Right. This became a big problem. Several people, however, even in Europe or near it, have wanted to preserve or reserve the ancient system, but without success. The spirit of Christianity has won over everything. The sacred cult has always remained, or again become independent of the sovereign, and without a necessary bond with the body of the state. Um, in other words, the sacred cult has always remained there. In other words, In other words, this has to be. In other words, even though Christianity won everything, the sacred cult has always remained, or again, became independent of the sovereign, right? And without a necessary bond within the body of the state. Therefore, that bond is the sacred bond of things. Now, that sacred bond now doesn't have a tie to the state. Muhammad had very sound views. He tried his political system. He tied his political system together well. And as long as the form of this government subsisted under his successor, the caliphates, the government was completely unified and good for that reason. So this is interesting. Rousseau saying, okay, Rousseau seems to be praising Muhammad here. Why? Because this idea that's the government, in other words, the political system and the religious system, the gods, were again unified in that sense, returning to the ancients in that sense. And as long as the Catholics remain, this government under the Catholics remained, the government was unified and good for that reason. But when the Arabs became prosperous, lettered, polished, soft, and weak, they were subjugated by the barbarians. So, therefore, once the Arabs became prosperous, lettered, polished, soft, and weak, they were subjugated. Then the divisions between the two powers began again. Although it is less apparent among the Mohammedans than the Christians, it is there nonetheless, especially in the sect of Ali, and there are states such as Persia, where it is continuously felt. Among us, the kings of England had established themselves as heads of the church, and the Tsar had done the same thing. But by this title, they made themselves not so much masters as the ministers. They have acquired not so much the right to change it as the power to maintain it. They are not its legislators; they are only its princes. So again, when the king and the Tsar and that just became the princes of the church, not the legislator of the church, right? So therefore, they were only there to maintain, not to change it, reform it, make it, but to perpetuate it. In that sense, this is interesting. Rousseau's position here. Wherever the clergy constitutes a body, it is master and legislature in that domain. So wherever the clergy constitutes a body, it is master and legislator in that domain. The body of the thing becomes the true master and is the true legislator. Now let's go look at. It must be carefully noted that it is not so much the formal assemblies, like those in France, that binds the clergy into a body, as it is the communion of churches, as it is the communion of. So it's not the estate, the church of the making of the estate, the formal assembly of this, but rather that binds the clergy into a body, as it is the communion of the churches, right? The communion and excommunication are the social compact of the clergy, a compact by means of which it will always be master of peoples and kings. So the control of communion and excommunion, those who enter the communion in that community and those who are removed from the community. They define who's in the community, who's what is. All the priests who take communion together are fellow citizens, even though they may come from opposite ends of the earth. This invention is a political masterpiece. The pagan priests had nothing that resembles it, and therefore they never constituted a body of clergymen. So in other words, the idea of communion. The priests are all over the different places, localized. And this is what makes this idea of communion makes Catholicism means universality in that sense. It makes it one, whole entity. This is why this idea of communion and therefore excommunion. This defines who is a citizen, who is a participant, who is this, right? So, so the clergy constitutes the body. It is master and sovereign in this way. There are therefore two powers, two sovereigns, in England and in Russia, just as everywhere else. Therefore, it's not England and Russia still has two powers. It's not unified. It is two sovereigns in that sense. The king is the prince. It's the two powers of what of the difference between the legislative and executive, right? Of all Christian authors, the philosopher Hobbes is the only one who correctly saw the evil and the remedy, who dared to propose the unification of the two heads of the eagle and the complete return of political unity, without which no state or government will ever will be or government will ever be well constituted. But he ought to have seen that the dominating spirit of Christianity was incompatible with his system, and that the interest of the priest would always be stronger than that of the state. It is not so much what is horrible and false in his political theory as what is correct and true that made it odious. In other words, what is odious in Hobbes is not that what is false, but rather what is true in that sense. Right? Consider among other things in a letter to Grotius. In other words, consider among other things in a letter Grotius wrote to his brother in April 11th, 1643, what this learned man approves and what he blames of in the book De Civa. It is true that being very indulgent, he appears to pardon the author's good points for the sake of his bad ones. But everyone is not so clement. Right? This is, it was 134. I have seen, writes Grotius, the treatise on the citizen. I approve of what is there in favor of kings, but I would not approve the foundation on which the author bases his opinions. He thinks that all men are naturally in a state of war, and he establishes some other things that are not in agreement with my principles. He even goes as far as to assert that there is a duty of each private individual to follow the religion approved in his homeland by the public authorities, if not adopting it in his heart, at least in professing it and submitting to it obediently. Rousseau presumably read this letter in Babric's translation preface to the French edition of Grotius's on the laws of war and peace, right? For Hobbes' own statement, see De Civa, chapter 6, paragraph 11, chapter 15, paragraph 17, chapter 15, paragraph 7 through 18, chapter 17, paragraph 27, chapter 18, paragraph 13 through 14. I believe that by treating the historic facts in light of this, one would easily refute the opposing sentiments of Bale and Waltburn, one of whom claims that no religion is useful to the body politic, the other who maintains, on the contrary, that Christianity is its firmest support. One would prove that the former or prove to the former that a state has never been founded without religion serving as its base, and the latter that Christian law is fundamentally more harmful than useful to the strong constitution of a state. To make myself completely understood, it is only necessary to give a little more precision to the overly vague ideas about religion that are relevant to my subject. So therefore, in other words, you have to go up to religion. Now, Bale versus Walgren. I think Walburn is going to be the religious one, and Bale's the atheist, right? And that this is the point here in that sense. Consider in relation to society, which is either general or particular, religion can also be divided into two types, namely the religion of man and the religion of a citizen. Now, this is the first point, and this is the note on 135. And he says, at this point, the final version of the draft of the manuscript, starting with its second paragraph. The opposition between religion of man and that of citizen reminds one of the distinction between natural man and citizen in Meal 1, first Meal Book 1. For a full development of Rousseau's natural religion, called here the true theism and that of divine, natural divine right, see the profession of faith of the Saviour Vicars in Emile 4, or the profession of faith of Julie in Nouvelle Louise, Book 6, chapter 11, as well as 5, Book 5, Chapter 5, and Master's book, Political Philosophy Rousseau, pages 54 90, and 89. The Rousseau intention to reconcile the tolerance of the philosopher, the theist, and the charity of the Christian. See his letters écrites de la Montagne 1, and which is and and something he wrote, and it's found in the Pelide, Book 4, page 1600. Okay. So this division here is that, which is either religion, which is general or particular religion, can be divided into two types, namely religion of man and religion of citizen. The former, without temples, altars, or rituals, limited to the purely internal cult of the supreme God and to the eternal duties of morality, is the pure and simple religion of the gospel, true theism of what it may be called a natural divine right. The latter, inscribed in a single country, gives it its gods, its own tutelary patrons. Its dogmas, rites, and external cults are prescribed by laws. Outside the single nation that observes it, everything is considered infidel, foreign, barbarous. It only intends. It only extends the duties and rights of man as far as his altars. In other words, again, in other words, the political culture is that it makes its rights, ritual dogma, its dogma, external rights are prescribed by the laws. Outside of the single nation that observes it, everything else is infidel, barbarous, right? It only extends the duty and rights of man as far as his altars. In other words, those in there doesn't speak to other gods in that sense. Such were all the religions of the early people, to which the name of civil or positive divine right can be given. So therefore, natural divine right is the altar of religion of man, human man, the original primitive religion, not the religion of all. This is natural divine right. Now, positive divine right is the early civil religion in that sense, right? There is a third, more bizarre type of religion, which, by giving men two legislative systems, two leaders, and two homelands, subjects them to contradictory duties and prevents them from being simultaneously devout men and citizens. The religion of the Lamas is like this, as is that of the Japanese and the Roman Catholicism, and that of the Japanese. It might be called the religion of priests. It leads to a type of mixed and unsocial right that has no name. So the Lamas, the Japanese Shinto religion, and mixed Roman Catholicism. This is what it has: two legislatures, two leaders, and two homelands. Interesting. It might be called the religion of the priests, right? It leads to a mixed and unsocial right that has no name. Considered from a political point of view, each of these three types of religion has its fault. The third is so manifestly bad that it is a waste of time to assume oneself by proving it. So I'm not going to, it's just, in other words, the third is so bad, I'm not going to waste my time to disprove it. Everything that destroys social unity is worthless. Everything that destroys social unity, all institutions that put man in contradiction with themselves are worthless. So therefore, not contradiction. This idea of this, anything that makes contradictions or balance. Here's like the question: is this an attack on? Is this attack on Montesquieu's idea of counterpoise, this idea of power to power, power to power, and unity. Now, this seeks a unity. Aristotle criticizes Plato. Aristotle in his Politics criticizes Plato account and Socrates' account and the Republic for being too united. In other words, this social unity is things that destroy social unity. Well, you can agree with that, but how much unity is required? How much unity is this thing is? Maybe seeking too much unity is a single unity, a unity that opposes everything, that reduces everything to a single form, is as destructive as no unity, right? Too much unity, again, this is a kind of Pareto optimality argument that I think Aristotle also means in his. I think this is what Aristotle ultimately means by the mean in that. Too much of a thing can destroy it as much too little of a thing. Um, and this is what the danger of this is, right? Um, all institutions that put man in contradictions with himself are worthless. So the idea that this things that seek contradiction, and I think I can this is where I can see his kind of criticism of the vision of. This is where one can start to see the criticism of, let's say, division of power or divided government or divided sovereignty, right? The idea this is tied that you can't have the idea that the will cannot be divided in the sense. So therefore, this is a very interesting point. He said all institutions that put man in contradiction with himself are worthless. The second is good in that it combines the divine cult with the love of the laws, and by making the homeland the object of a citizen praise. It teaches them that to serve the state is to serve its tutelary God. It is a kind of theocracy in which there ought to be no other pontiff than the prince, no other priest than the magistrates. Then to die for one's country is to be martyred. To violate the laws is to be impious. To be a subject, and to the subject, a guilty man to public execution is to deliver him to the anger of the gods. A Sacre et estod. Let him be demanded, right? Sacra estrad. Let it be demanded. This formula was used when a citizen was cut off from the citizens and left to the judgment of the gods. Rousseau's violent criticism of Catholicism is very much based on the realization that among believers, the power of excommunication, even the refusal of the sacraments, is the most serious penalty. As Hobbes put it, no man can serve two masters, nor is he less, but rather more of a master, whom we believe we are to obey for fear of damnation, than he whom we fear for fear of temporal death. De Cive and the Citizen, chapter 6, paragraph 11. Compare Rousseau's a note on the clergy with that on marriage, especially in its original form, at the end of the Geneva manuscript. In that sense, you get the similar thing. The two, you compare the two manuscripts. In that sense, you get the teach position on that. But this religion is bad. But not this religion is bad in that, being based on error and falsehood, it deceives men. It makes them credulous, superstitious, and drowns the true cult of divinity in empty ceremony. So therefore, the second one, right, is bad, and that's too. It is bad too whenever it becomes exclusive and tyrannical and makes the people bloodthirsty and intolerant to the point where it lives only for murder and massacre, and believes it performs a holy act when killing whomever it does not accept its God. This places such a people in a natural state of war with all the others, which is very harmful to its own security. In other words, this perpetual wage of war. This perpetual wage of war. this religion. This becomes a bloodthirsty religion. It does not the other is in other words. It treats the non-believer. I mean, but this. But how is this not a kind of attack on a not this kind of religion? See, this is but while this is true, the danger of this is becomes dangerous when what? It creates a in other words, it makes them superstitious, draws out the true cult of divinity, an empty ceremonial. It's bad. It is bad too whenever it becomes exclusive and tyrannical, making the people blood. So therefore, but is this true also not of this, but also of the first as well? Because what happens, the danger of the first is becomes the Islam. Now, this is not directed as a kind of Islam, but is not it does not could not we argue that Islam, who has this like Hamas in that sense, the way modern political Islam has become, isn't modern political Islam this? Isn't the Kefalist, the desire for the Kefalist, desire for universal rule, not the universal humanity of the first, the third thing that he'll talk about, or the first one he'll talk about, the natural divine right, but rather this. It is a positive, and technically, all if we understand the Torah and the Sharia in that sense as law, right? Isn't that therefore positive? Isn't there a theology that's positive in that sense? And here, and therefore, this is what. Therefore, it is this civic law in a sense, and this is it makes them the enemies of humanity in a sense. They become such people in a natural state of war with all the others, which is harmful to their selection because they become the enemies of everyone, right? Enemies of humanity. Okay. There remains the religion of man, or Christianity, not that of today, but that of the Gospels, which is totally different from it. So therefore, this return to the gospel religions. Though this saintly, sublime, and true religion, children of the same God, all acknowledge one another as brothers, and a society that unites them is not even dissolved by death. But this religion, having no particular relation to the body politic, leaves laws with their only intrinsic force, without adding any other force to them. And because of this, one of the great bonds of particular societies remain without effect. In other words, by doing this, the religious bond, the bond of religion, the bond of faithfulness, is removed. So religion does this by separates the two, right? And leaves the laws with only their intrinsic force, without adding any other force to them. And because of this, one of the greatest bonds of particular societies remain without effect. Even worse, far from attaching the citizens' hearts to the state, it detaches them from all worldly things. I know of nothing more contrary to the social spirit. So therefore, this is very interesting. The Catholic thing, he's not going to even attack. Not worth attacking. So he just criticized he gave. It's interesting. This is the first one is the best, but then remember his critique of his position on the second position, right? In that sense, right? The second one, the positive the divine law. He then divides into two things: the positive and then the negative. And the negative is very specific, but the negative is it's extremist, right? An extremist. Now the danger here is that it separates it is wonderful, it's great, it creates a common it is bond, it offers something that unites all humanity in that sense, right? But it leaves in this world powerless. Isn't this Machiavelli's isn't this Machiavelli even worse from attaching its citizens' heart to the state? It attaches them from all worldly things. I know nothing more contrary to the social spirit. Now let's look at, and this is very much the kind of toned down Rousseau. As de Reyth points out, this sentence and the following criticisms of Christianity on political grounds was heavily attacked. By particular societies and social spirits, Rousseau meant political communities. The great society, human society in general, is founded on humanity of universal benevolence. I say that I have always said that Christianity is favorable to that society. But the particular societies, political and civil societies, have an entire different principle. They are purely human establishments from which, as a consequence, the true Christianity detaches us from all that is only earthly. This is the letter to Oresteli Ustri, July 18, 1763. Compare Geneva Manuscript 1, Book 1, Chapter 2, the long chapter deleted from the final version. In a sense, Rousseau's rejection of a general society of the human species, based solely on reason, required in its place a civil religion. Hence, for Chapter 8 of the Social Contract is perhaps best understood as Rousseau's replacement of his idea of a general society of the human species in the Geneva manuscript. Right? So therefore, that's the thing that's missing. And if you look at the Geneva manuscript for Rousseau, there's in Book 1 a society of the human society, and Rousseau does not have that in this the version of the social contract that we have. So instead, we get this discussion of Christianity that's here, right, in the civil religion. It says, we are told that a people of true Christians would form the most perfect society that can be imagined. I see only one major difficulty of this assumption, which is that a society of true Christians would no longer be a society of men. So therefore, it wouldn't be a society. There's no society of men. It destroys society in that sense. It destroys the social spirit. I even say that assuming that such a society existed with all its perfections, it would be neither the strongest nor the most lasting. By dint of being perfect, it would lack cohesion, and its destroying vice would lie in its very perfection. Everyone would fulfill his duty. The people would be subject to the laws. The leader would be just and moderate. The magistrate honors and incorruptible. The soldiers would scorn death, and there would be neither vanity nor luxury. All that is very well, but let us look further. Christianity is a total spiritual religion, uniquely concerned with heavenly matters. The Christian homeland is not of this world. He does his duty. It is true, but he does it with profound indifference for the good or bad outcomes of his effect. As long as he has nothing to reproach himself for, it matters little for him whether things go well or badly here on earth. For if the state is flourishing, he barely dares to enjoy the public felicity for fear of becoming proud of his country's glory. If the state declines, he blesses the hand of God that weighs heavy on his people. So therefore, he's not a good citizen. He's not a good citizen in a sense. He cannot, if it's going well, I better not praise it too much because I might be vain. In other words, I might, fear becoming proud, right? And then if it declines, well, God, praise God for doing that. In order for the society to be peaceful and harmonious to last, all citizens without exception would have to be equally good Christians. But unfortunately, there is a single ambitious man, a single hypocrite, a Catiline, for example, or a Cromwell. He will very certain get the better of his pious compatriots. Christian charity makes it hard to think ill of one's neighbor. As soon as he has learned the art of how to trick them through some ruse and seize some part of the political authority for himself, he will be a man of constituted dignity. It is God's will to respect him. Soon he is powerful. It is God's will to obey him. Does the depository of power abuse it? He is the rod with God punishes. Does the depository of this power abuse it? He is the rod with which God punishes his children. He would be against conscience to chase out the usurper, for it would be necessary to disturb the public tranquility, to use violence, shed blood. All of that is inconsistent with the gentleness of Christianity. And after all, what does it matter whether one is free or a serf in this vale of tears? The essential thing is to go to heaven, and resignation, but an additional means of doing so. I can just see Machiavelli getting disgusted with this. It's like, let this world go to hell, and that's it. This otherworldliness. I mean, one could maybe say that that is tied to that first. I mean, the criticism here is this otherworldliness. But what happens? This is to assume God as the otherworldliness and that the other world. But what about the idea that the incarnation is in this world, that Christ is in this world, and that this world is as much part of this, and that it's not an otherworldly world, that it's time, not it's a time, not a the otherness is not it's not this moment, but the time has not come for the moment, right? That the two things merge, right? So this is a very Rousseau here gives a very damning thing of Christianity in that sense, particularly this kind of night, the last thing, this pure Christianity. It's unworldly, but so interesting. Therefore, he's been silent about Catholicism. It's imperfect, but it's it, the two kingdoms. Hmm. What if a foreign war breaks out? The citizens march ready to combat. None of them thinks of fleeing. They do their duty, but without passion for victory. They know how to die rather than to win. What does it matter if there are victors or vanquished? Doesn't Providence know better than they what is good for them? Imagine how proud, impious, and passion. Imagine how a proud, impious, and passionate enemy can take advantage of their stoicism. Confront them with those generous and proud people consumed by a burning love of glory and homeland. Suppose that your Christian republic is face to face with Sparta or Rome. The pious Christian will be beaten, crushed, and destroyed before they had time to look around, or they will owe their salvation only to the scorn of their enemies. Only to the scorn their enemies will conceive for them. The oath taken by the soldiers of Fabius was a fine one in my mind. They did not swear to die. They did not swear to die or to win. They swore to return as victors, and they kept their promise. Christians would never have made such a promise. They would never. They would never have believed that they were. They would have believed that they were tempting God. But I am mistaken when I speak of a Christian republic. These two words are mutually exclusive. So you can't talk about a Christian republic. The Christian is always universal. It can't be particular, right? Christianity preaches nothing but servitude and dependence. Its spirit is so favorable to tyranny that tyranny always profits from it. True Christians are made to be slaves. 138. Compare Nietzsche's treatment of Judaism, especially in especially Christianity, in the Slave Revolt of Morality, Genealogy of Morals. If we get book 1, chapter 10. So we get here a kind of prelude to Nietzsche, right? They know it and are scarcely moved by them. This brief life is too little worth in their view. Christian troops are excellent, we are told. I deny this. Let someone show me some. For myself, I don't know of any Christian troops. Crusaders will be cited. Without arguing over the valor of the Crusaders, I shall note that very far from being Christians, they were soldiers of the priests. They were citizens of the church. They were fighting for its spiritual country, which the church had made temporal in some unknown way. Properly understood, this amounts to paganism. Since the gospel does not establish a national religion, a holy war is impossible among Christians. In that sense, a holy war is impossible because the gospel does not establish national religions. Um, so this is. I wonder what he's doing. He's. If you take this is kind of a kind of a simplistic Protestantism. He kind of makes a reduction to a liberal Protestantism here. The gospel, the religion of the gospels itself, the gospels, only the gospels. Here, the Calvinist in me says, but the gospel is not the whole thing. It's not the whole ball of wax. And it does not negate, it does not supersede the Old Testament. It rather is kind of a reflection of it through a different lens, through more information. It does not nullify, it does not delete, it does not make irrelevant, and that it doesn't repeat too. It does correct, but it doesn't correct what's correct. Okay, so there, and therefore doesn't always repeat what is correct. Okay, so is the teaching of the Old Testament in the Torah about the nation, about the political community? Is that addressed there? Is that addressed there in some way? Is the nation addressed in the Torah in that sense, and therefore the gospel is silent about it in a weird way? That's an interesting question. And does Rousseau, by Rousseau becoming this Protestant, doesn't this make him go too far? His criticism of Christianity in that sense. Okay. Under the pagan emperors, Christians were brave. All Christians assert this, and I believe it. There was a competition for honors against the pagan troops. As soon as the emperors were Christians, this emulation ceased. And when the cross chased out the eagle, all Roman valor disappeared. This echoes very much what what's his name Gibbon will argue, right? Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, right? By setting political considerations aside, let us return to right and determine its principles concerning this important point. The right of the social compact gives the sovereign over the subject does not exceed, as far as I've said, the limits of public utility. In the Republic, says Marcus d'Anson, each person is perfectly free with regard to everything that does not harm others. That this is the unvarying limit. He's free with regard to everything that does not harm others. This is in the Republic, right? It cannot be said with greater precision. I have not been able to forego the pleasure of citing this manuscript a few times, even though it is unknown to the public. To honor the memory of an illustrious and respectable man who preserved even the office of the minister of the heart of a true citizen, the upright and healthy views of the government of his country. Now, interesting. Now, 139. The passage quoted in this note has not been found in the published version of the Marquis de Sant's Considerations. Rousseau's four citations of D'Argasson's see Masters' Political Theology Rousseau, Political Philosophy Rousseau, in pages 306 to 309. The subjects, therefore, do not have to account for their opinions. The subjects, therefore, do not have to account for their opinions to the sovereign, except as those opinions matter to the community. So again, the opinions, their opinions, it doesn't, as long as it does not affect others. If and it affects others when it impacts on the community and society. This is very interesting. Notice he goes to the community, chooses the word community here, not society. That's how it matters, how it matters greatly to the state that each citizen have a religion that causes him to love his duties. But the dogmas of that religion are of no interest either to the state or to its members, except insofar as these dogmas relate to morality and the duties that everyone who professes it is obliged to fulfill towards the other. So therefore, the only thing it's in other words, the only concern here that others will have is the question of morality. What is related? Therefore, the only concern about religion is what about morality? What is his morals? Because this is it's internal question about what is owed to God and what is owed to the divine. That doesn't matter. We don't care because it doesn't necessarily impact other people. But morals, its view about morals does, right? It's really obligation, right? Um, okay, let me repeat that. He says, uh, which relate to morality and the duties that everyone who professes it is obliged to fulfill to one another. Everyone can have whatever opinion he pleases beyond that, without the sovereign having to know what they are. So therefore, in other words, only the opinions that don't affect others, what one does to others, or impacts others, can have whatever opinion. But morality, since morality does matter, does impact that morality matters. We can judge morality. Rousseau, opinions about morality matter. Opinions about the Eucharist or the relationship to communion of God and other things, these don't matter. That they can have the opinions he pleases on that. The sovereign having to know what they, without the sovereign having to know what they are. For since the sovereign has no competence in the other world, whatever the fate of his subjects in the life hereafter is none of his business, as long as they are good citizens in this one. Okay. In other words, I don't care about your other life. I have no jurisdiction of heaven. So therefore, you want to be. You're not going to go to as long as your morality, you're a good citizen here, a good citizen in this world. I only care about the citizens of this in this sense. There is therefore a purely civil profession of faith. Therefore, there is a purely civil profession of faith, the articles of which are for the sovereign to establish. Not exactly a religious dogmas, but a sentiment of sociability, without which it's impossible to be a good citizen or a faithful subject. And pleading for Catiline, Caesar tried to establish the dogma of morality of the soul. To refute him, Cato and Cicero wasted no time philosophizing. They contented themselves with showing that Caesar was speaking as a bad citizen and advancing a doctrine that was pernicious to the state. Indeed, this was what the Roman Senate had to judge, not a question of theology. In other words, it wasn't the question of theology. Catiline, right? Caesar tried to plead for Catiline. No, no, this is not about the theology. This is about the question of the security of the state. In other words, a judge had to judge that was a bad man, that he broke acts, he broke his faith in not the question of the soul. Without being able to oblige anyone to believe, without being able to oblige anyone to believe them, the sovereign can banish from the state anyone who does not believe them. Okay, I can't make this, but I can kick you out. I can excommunicate you. You believe it or you don't believe it. If you don't believe it, then go away. You're not a good citizen. You can't be a good citizen. This is the civil. I can't make you believe it, but you have to at least comply with it. Do it. Without being obliged, in other words, not being able to oblige anyone to believe them. The sovereign can banish from the state anyone who does not believe them. The sovereign can banish him not for being impious, but for being unsociable. for being incapable of sincerely loving the laws, justice, and of giving his life, if need be, for his duty. In other words, it's not that I'm not expelling you for you. The argument here, I'm not expelling you for belief. I'm expelling you for your being unsociable. You're not. In other words, this is a very tricky argument. It's not belief; it's your insociability. You're not willing to believe these things, and therefore are being unsocial. And what is that? For being incapable of sincerely loving the laws, justice, and of giving his life, need be, for his duty. If someone who has publicly acknowledged these same dogmas behaves though he does not believe them, he should be punished with death. He had committed the greatest of crime. He lied before the laws. So he can claim to believe it, but then he does it the opposite. This merits death. Uh, Rousseau's endorsement of the death penalty for behavior violating of dogma of civil religion makes a toughness in his thought that is often overlooked. Nevertheless, it must be stressed that for Rousseau, only behavior, never opinion or belief, can be punished by society. So behavior, not opinion, is society. I'm indignant that everyone's faith is not in the most perfect freedom, and that man dares to inspect the interior consciousness where he cannot penetrate, as if it depends on us to believe or not believe in that matter. Where is the proof? Letter to Voltaire, right? August 18, 1756. Hence Rousseau asserted everywhere, no true believer could be intolerant or a prosecutor. If I were a magistrate and the law provided for the death penalty against atheists, I would begin by having burned as one whomever came to denounce another. Nouvelle Louise, Book 5, Chapter 5. So therefore, this idea of his position. The dogma of the civil religion ought to be simple, few in number, stated in precision, without explanations or commentary. So therefore, the dogmas of it. The existence of a powerful, intelligent, and beneficent, foresighted, and providential deity. That's the first one, right? So this is what they should be few, and that not commentary. So the existence of a powerful, intelligent, beneficent, foresighted, providential deity. The afterlife, the happiness of the just, the punishment of the wicked, the sanctity of the social contract and the laws. So this is what he says. We have how many? One, the provisions of the God, right? The God, an existence of a powerful, intelligent, beneficent, foresighted, that. The afterlife, the happiness of the just, the punishment of the wicked, and the sanctity of the social contract. 5. These are the positive dogmas. These are the positive dogmas. As for the negative ones, I shall limit them to a single one: intolerance. In other words, you should be. In other words, it's negative. One should not have intolerance. It belongs with the cults we have excluded. Um, These dogmas should be compared with the profession of faith, both in Emile and the Nouvelle Louise. Rousseau's attempt to combine religious belief and toleration will strike many modern readers as anachronistic. But it is curious that the political practice of Western democracies, most notably the United States, resembles Rousseau's precepts. Along with toleration of varied religious beliefs, one finds a general hostility to avowed atheism. Conversely, where atheism has been publicly proclaimed as the Soviet Union, there's been a tendency to convert the ruling party, ruling political ideology into a kind of state religion. Those who have those who make a distinction between civil and theological intolerance are mistaken, in my opinion. Those two intolerances are inseparable. It is impossible to live in peace with people whom one believes are damned. To love them is to love them would be to hate God who punishes them. They must absolutely be either brought into the faith or tormented. Whether theological intolerance exists, it is impossible for it not to have some civic effect. Okay, this is the quote. For as soon as it does, the sovereign is no longer sovereign, even in temporal matters. Here, marriage, for example, being a social contract, has civil effect without society, without which society could not even subsist. Right. This is 120, 142 note. This note, which softened from the first draft, right, and see the end of the Geneva manuscript, editorial note 42, was the source of considerable concern to Rousseau. After the social contract has printed, he wrote to the publisher, "I want this note eliminated whenever it costs, whatever it costs, for your advantage as well as mine. Your advantage as well as my own." Letters to Ray, March 14, 1762. Ray therefore had to reset the last page of the book without this note, which is only published in the posthumous edition of 1782. So this note is like, okay, well, is that marriage being a civil contract has civic effects without which society could not subsist. Suppose then that a clergy obtain for itself alone the right to pass this act, a right in its inevitable usurps in any intolerant religion. Then isn't it clear that by the asserting the church authority in this domain, it will render ineffectual that of the prince, who will have no other subject than those whom the clergy is willing to give him, as the master of which people can or cannot be married, according to which they do or do not subscribe to one of another doctrine, whether they accept or reject one or another formula, whether they are more or less devout. Isn't it clear that by behaving prudently and standing firm, the clergy will have at its sole command inheritances, offices, children's, the state itself, which it could not subsist if it were composed only of bastards? But it will be objected. Appeals will be made against such abuses. There will be summons, decrees, cheeses of church holdings. What a pity! If the clergy has a little, I won't say courage, but good sense, it will let this happen and go on as usual. I will. I will. It will tranquility allow the appeals. It will tranquilly allow the appeals, summons, decrees, and seizures, and will end up by being the master. It's not, as it seems to me, a great sacrifice to abandon a part when one is sure to take possession of the whole. So therefore, this is by controlling marriage as the church does. And in fact, this will be the thing why he's alive. He wants it removed because it's and this is that paragraph that Masters says it bothers him in that sense. So therefore, says that whenever theological intolerance exists, it is impossible for it to not have some specific effect. As soon as it does, the sovereign will no longer be sovereign, even over temporal matters. From then on, priests are the true masters. Kings are merely their officers. Now that there is no longer, and can never be, never again be, an exclusive natural religion, right? One should tolerate all those religions that tolerate others, insofar as their dogmas are in no way contrary to the duties of citizens. So therefore, since there cannot be again exclusively national religions, you're going to have people who are going to be there. Exclusive natural, everyone believes the same thing. But that's not going to be, because you're not going to have that. You're going to have other things. So therefore, you have to tolerate others as long as what? Tolerate the others as long as their dogmas are in no way contrary to duties of citizens. But whoever dares to say that there is no salvation outside of the church should be chased out of the state, unless the state is the church and the prince is the pontiff. Such a dogma is only good in a theocratic government. In any other, it is pernicious. So therefore, the reason for which Henry IV is said to have embraced Roman Catholicism ought to make every honest man, especially prince capable of reasoning, leave it. Okay, this is the church now. The Paris is worth the mass, right? 143. This is Henry IV, the first Bourbon king. He said Henry IV's reasoning is described as below. The historian reports that the king had a debate between the doctors of both churches conducted in his presence, seeing that a Protestant minister agreed that one could be saved in the Catholic religion. His Majesty spoke as follows to the minister: "What? Do you agree that one can be saved in the religion of those men over there?" The minister replied that he did not doubt it, provided that one lived well. The king replied judiciously, "Prudence indicates then that I be of their religion, not yours, because being theirs, I can be saved according to no, being because being in theirs, I can be saved according to them and according to you. And according to yours, I can be saved according to you, but not according to them. How prudence indicates this, that I follow the most assured religion. This is the history of Henry the Grand, the King Henry the Grand, of the prefix. Right? This is again. So this is very interesting of this of Henry IV. And we end here on the chapter, end the chapter here with the example of Henry IV. That this is the thing. That therefore the other church says no, no. And again, that is the example of Henry IV. Not because it's so calculating, but there's no salvation outside the church. And because of this, my choice is, well, I'm going to have to go with him. That a calculation, right? The calculation of salvation did his decision, not what was really true best for the people or best for the kingdom. Chapter 9, the conclusion. After setting forth the true principles of political right and trying to found the state on this basis, what remains to be done is to buttress the state by its foreign relations, which would include international law, commerce, and the right of law, conquests, public right of war and conquest. In other words, it would include international law, commerce, the right of law and conquest, public law, alliances, negotiations, treaties, etc. But all that consumes a new object too vast for my limited purview. I should have always set my sight closer to myself. Now, 144, this is the last note. Let's go look at here. On Rousseau's approach to foreign policy and his decision to delete such considerations when abandoning his projected political institutions. See, editorial note for 106 on page 106. Let's go look at this. See editorial note for so okay, I can't find it. There it is. In the last analysis, Rousseau seems to have been less interested by problems which he called external and relative than those he seemed internal and absolute. So again, this is the problem. This is what, in other words, his political inquiries. He's more concerned with the nature of the state. In other words, he's concerned with it. Was it? Well, let's look at this point. This is that. I think that is the good point. Masters hit it. Roger hit it right. That external and relative. He's less concerned with the external and relative, and the internal and the absolute. Therefore, the regime or the state structure itself, the internal structure, the absolute and internal structure of this as the most important, or the one that he concerned himself with. And this would ends it. This is why he doesn't. He would have to talk about the international law, commerce, right of laws and peace, public law, alliances, negotiations, treaties, etc., etc. He doesn't do this. He stops. He focuses on the state structure and the institutional state and the political state in that sense. So we'll stop right here. If you have any comments, questions, Senzar comment of this. If you have any questions, comments, or things, please put them below. I will, when I see them, I will respond to them, and I will kind of say, "Oh, that's what it is," and I'll, answer it. If any comments of this. If you've liked it, hit the like button. Please put the like button. Share it with friends. Share it on social media. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Now, of course, if you didn't like it or had problems or criticisms, put the criticisms. Say why what you didn't like it. Say why. Put your criticisms in the comments, please. Maybe we can learn. People can learn from them in that sense. That's good. That's what we're here for in that sense. Otherwise, you can follow me on social media links below. You can follow me on social media. It's raining outside. Follow me on social media links below. You can follow me as a academic in the academic social media, which has like my research papers and things like this that can be found there. If you want to help me doing what I'm doing, very soon. My wife's saying I have to go get my beard is getting too long, so I'm gonna probably one time soon you're gonna be seeing me without the beard or something shaved. But you can. Wow, why did that come in my mind? I'm looking at my pictures. Okay. Another thing you can help me is you want to help me do what I'm doing here. Help me to want to contribute in a way, financial way. You can do so by becoming a subscribe star member, or a Patreon member, and through those mechanisms. And I'm not gonna have I don't have big demands. It's maybe I should have big demands. Maybe I haven't found a means of having a tip jar. I don't have a tip jar. I'm not big enough of a channel to have monetization to get gifts and gifts or things like that, which it'd be nice. Tip jars. I should do that. Here, pay my tip jar, please. I will work for comments for food, man. Okay, I'm making fun of myself. Well, that's it. We finished here Rousseau in that sense. Oh, okay. Another way you can help is to, one of my books. You can buy my books if you're not. There's nothing on Rousseau. I have not written a book on Rousseau, unfortunately. I joke about this. This is my Rousseau is as if you see my copy of the social contract, you'll be shocked how everything has been numbered and how many years I've studied this. I've studied this as long as the politics. Okay, these have been kind of like, and also Hobbes, Leviathan. Those were in Machiavelli's Prince. The Prince, that, and the only one third book is I would look at it would be the Spirit of the Laws too. Spirit of the Laws, and Tocqueville. Okay. If I looked at my life, I studied the Republic, but not as much as the politics. Aristotle's politics is like the ethics. No, I mean honestly, the ethics to some degree that deals with politics. Yes, I've dealt with it as closely in that sense. Ethics and politics are usually together in that sense. Then the next one is Machiavelli's Prince. Prince more than the discourses, and that is because I taught the Prince for so many years. And you don't really get to teach discourses for like introduction course and some of that. So you do the Prince, and therefore, and therefore that's what you do. And then the other one you do is my next one would be, of course, Leviathan. Leviathan is, I spent a lot of time on Leviathan. Leviathan is hard, but I don't like teaching it because it's too complicated. It's too big. It's too broad a monstrous book. I did a reading group recently with it, and I know last time when I did my seminar with Dr. Mort Frisch on it, it was something. Okay, I'm talking too long in this. I'm sorry. I'm acting like this is a live thing. It's not a live thing. So, so therefore, this is probably what I'll talk about today and the books that influenced me. So therefore, again, that's Fridays. We do that in Fridays. So, oops, I should cut this out, but I'm not going to be able. I don't know how to edit. I'm a newbie. Again, we wrap up Rousseau today in that sense of the social contract. I will do the political economy next. It'll be probably 4 or 5 videos of that, and then we will do um, something else in Rousseau. Maybe the man. I don't know what we'll do in Rousseau. Maybe not. Maybe I'll finally try. Maybe when I finish, I remember on Tuesdays and Thursdays at this time we're doing Schmidt, and then like I said, Friday some live stream. Okay, well take care and bye bye. See you soon when we next do the next time you see us. We'll be doing on Rousseau's political economy. Take care. Bye bye.